But tonight we're talking about happiness. We're talking about satisfaction that is not based on circumstance. We ended in the book of Ecclesiastes last week, and that's kind of where I want to start this week. Solomon writes these words in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 24. He says, "There is nothing better than a person to find satisfaction in their own toil." Okay, now remember the entire book of Ecclesiastes is this thought experiment about life, where he goes through all of the stuff that he has done in his life to try to find satisfaction. One of those is the toil or the achievement of his own hands. And so he writes in 2:24, "There is nothing better than for a person to find satisfaction in their own toil." That's what he believed would bring him happiness, was finding satisfaction in what he accomplishes. Yet that is the very thing that eludes him as he writes. He says this in verses 4, 8, and 10 of chapter 2. "I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the sons of man. And whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure." He said, I had it all. I mean, money and kingdoms, and I had everything that anybody could ever want with their hands. I got it. And then yet in verse 17, he says this, "So I hated my life. I hated my life. Because what is done under the sun was grievous to me. For all is vanity and striving after the wind." I have everything that you could get when it comes to achieving something, and I hated my life. He's coming to this reality that not only does he struggle for meaning in the world, he was also battling the disappointment of having everything and not ultimately being satisfied, not ultimately being happy. And the truth is that all human beings are under that same reality. This same reality of wanting and hoping for a satisfaction that we ultimately don't get. Searching for a happiness that we so desire and long for, and yet always feeling like we're coming up short. So the question is, what do we then do to be happy? What is it that brings happiness in this world? What is it that brings satisfaction? This is what we're going to discuss tonight. A satisfaction or happiness that is not based on circumstances. Let me just correct something real quick as we move forward, because you're going to hear me use this word happy or satisfaction back and forth. There is a popular description of happiness and joy in the Bible, or people say that's in the Bible, and they say there's a difference between joy and happiness. You ever heard that? That joy... Okay, when it comes to biblical language, okay, there is no separation between happiness and joy. Okay? Biblical language, it interchanges those. Happiness, delight, joy, those are things that, in fact, it is probably a proper and good English translation to translate the Beatitudes, when it says, "Blessed is the man," to actually translate it, "Happy is the man." That's a proper translation. So, when I use the word happiness, I'm talking about this deep, satisfying, long-lasting happiness that everyone knows that they want and need down deep. Okay? We may even call it divine happiness, even though people may not know that that's where they should turn. And that's what this is all about tonight. Now, because human beings struggle with this, the ancient cultures developed early hypotheses for how to be happy. They came up with ideas or ways in order to try to make people happy. The view that I'm going to look at was made popular by the Greek Stoics. It was made popular by Eastern Asian religions. They had this this view of how do we approach happiness. We all want to be happy. Now, how do we do it? This was the basic principle of how to deal with happiness. They said, we are all unhappy, even in success, because we seek happiness from our success. Okay? They said, so we're basically all dissatisfied and not happy because we're, even in the midst of all of our success, because we're trying to find our happiness in the success. And it doesn't actually bring us the satisfaction that we want. So things like wealth, power, achievement, family, material comfort, security, any external goods of this world, they can lead to a momentary satisfaction, but it will ultimately fade away, leaving you more empty than you were to begin with. So here's what they said. In order to achieve satisfaction or happiness, you should not try to change the circumstances of the world, but rather change your attitude about the things of the world. Don't try to fulfill your desires, rather control and manage them. They said to avoid having our inner contentment overthrown by the loss of things, because that's eventually what's going to happen, right? If you put your satisfaction, hope in stuff, eventually you're going to lose that stuff, and then you fall into this emotionally depressed attitude because now happiness is gone because my stuff is gone. So here was their remedy. Their remedy was, do not become emotionally attached to anything. So that was their remedy. Their remedy was, okay, we know that we are seeking our happiness in our success and the stuff that we get. And so what we have to do, here's our remedy. Let's not emotionally attach to anything. Let's emotionally detach from everything. That'll be the remedy. So when we lose the stuff, we'll ultimately be happy. But this view is not, this view of satisfaction is not very satisfying. Many believe that it takes things too far. For instance, all modern research that we have done has shown that interpersonal relationships, that human relationships are valued in giving us satisfaction, in making us happy. So how can then you say detach from everything in the world when everything in us is longing for personal relationships to help us be happy? It's impossible. How can I detach emotionally from my wife and then turn around and be satisfied and happy in the world? I can't, because there's something within me that knows that personal relationship matters. So to emotionally detach will probably actually undermine happiness. Another major problem with this view is that you'll never want to change anything socially. So in other words, if you see a problem in the world, you won't have a desire to change that because you have detached from any of the worldly issues. And so you'll just simply say, well, I'm not going to do anything to change the situation. I'm simply just going to change my attitude toward the situation and emotionally detach from it. By the way, I think that's what a lot of people have done with abortion in America. A lot of Christians have done with abortion in America. We've detached from the issue. We've detached from it. You see, what happened in Florida with the shooting of those children, it's very hard for us to detach from it because it's right there in front of our face. But with abortion, we just want to emotionally detach from it because it almost helps us cope with the reality of what's going on. But here's the danger in that. When you emotionally detach, you're not moved to change it. You're not moved to change it. You're content sitting back. So that's the problem with this view. Emotionally detaching from things is not going to bring happiness. And it's not going to change anything. So, the only other option is, right, from a worldly perspective, well, is to super emotionally attach to everything. I'm going to emotionally attach myself to all my stuff. And then we're right back in the same problem. And we just go back and forth, right? It's like two extremes. We either emotionally attach to everything, and then when stuff gets taken away, it crushes us, or we emotionally detach from everything, and then we don't have happiness, and we don't change anything, and the world's horrible. So we go back and forth. Now, the truth is, if we stand back about everything we've learned about happiness in the history of mankind over the centuries, here's what's scary. We've made no progress in satisfaction. I mean, think about the modern world, right? Think about how everything is different today. Travel. I mean, how crazy is it to think that you can get on a plane today and travel across the world in one day? And it's absurd. I mean, ancient civilizations would have been like, you can get from one side of the world to the other side of the world in one day? Yeah. Think about how far technology has come. I love technology, and I am always blown away at the technology that I can hold in my hand with my phone. I mean, the supercomputers that took up story after story after story of a building when they first came about had less technology in it than you have in your hand every day. The amount of stuff that we've accomplished. Think about medicine. Think about science, how far we have come and what we have learned. And yet, in spite of all of that, all the research shows that societies today are just as unhappy as they've ever been. We are not any more happy today than we were when we didn't have all this stuff. So it shows us that we've really not come very far in trying to figure out this issue. All right? The ancient Stoics and Asian Eastern religions were trying to figure it out. Guess what we're doing today? We're trying to figure out, and we're no closer to coming up with a good remedy for how people can be happy. As Solomon says in Ecclesiastes 3:15, that which is already has been, that which is to be already has been. We're still searching. I would also argue that our dissatisfaction and unhappiness in the world goes way deeper than we're willing to admit. I believe if you ask the average person on the street, are you happy with where you are in life? Are you satisfied with your life? I don't think you get an honest answer. Either they wouldn't be honest with you, or they themselves don't even know how dissatisfied and unhappy they are. The truth is, we can say we're happy. We can say we don't care about being happy, but in the end, everyone wants to be satisfied and happy. Everybody. You say, well, why is that? Why is that a universal desire? It's because we're made in the image of God. Because we are made in the image of God. The reason why we talked about meaning last week, everyone wants to have a meaningful life because we're made in the image of God. Everyone wants to be happy because we're made in the image of God. So there's two basic things we want in our happiness or in our satisfaction. Two basic things. Number one, we want a satisfaction that lasts. Okay? Now we'll all admit that we can get something, some material thing, all right? Some external physical thing. We can get it, and what happens to our happiness? It can spike really quickly, right? Like we love the fact, like, oh, we've got this thing. We've always wanted this thing. We got it. We always wanted this person, and now we have it. We've always wanted this relationship, and now we have it. And so our happiness and our satisfaction may spike. But what ultimately then happens? It comes back down. And we're on a roller coaster of happiness, or a roller coaster of satisfaction. There's a famous poem titled Sunday Morning. I don't know if you guys have ever read the famous poem Sunday Morning, written by Wallace Stevens. And this is what's written. But in contentment, I still feel the need for an imperishable bliss. Even when I'm content in the moment, there's still a longing in me for a bliss that won't go away. Like I know that so here's what happens. Once you experience that roller coaster, right? Have you ever been to Six Flags and rode a roller coaster or something? I get very nauseous very quickly. I don't like roller coasters. If they go upside down or around in circles, I'm done for. Done for. And it makes me, because I'm just so nauseated. But once you've ridden a roller coaster and you know where the twists and turns are and stuff, right? There's this anticipation about the thrill you're going to get. But what happens with a roller coaster is that you know the ups and downs. Like you know the thrill's coming, and then you know it's going to be over, and you wait in line for 4 hours, and the ride lasts 13 seconds, and then you're done, and you're like, I waited in line for 4 hours. I mean, it was fun for 13 seconds. But that's kind of how happiness is, because here's what happens: you get this thing that you wanted. The spike of joy and happiness hits, but even as you're content in it, do you know what's coming? The fall. And so it becomes harder and harder to even find happiness in acquiring what you're getting, because you know, well, this ain't going to last. I'm happy, but it's not going to last very long. And so now I can't even be happy when I'm supposed to be happy, because I know my happiness is not going to be happy very long. And it's so we're just in this cycle, and so it begins to fade as soon as it comes along, and we all long for this satisfaction that's not on a roller coaster ride. We long for a satisfaction that comes and stays, but we don't find it. So we become jaded. We come to believe that it's not even possible to achieve happiness. We become more and more numb, more and more cynical. We've all heard the stories of celebrities who have it all, and yet tragically they take their own lives. Having it all. Like Solomon said, having it all, but yet they take their own lives. And what is becoming more and more apparent to me, as the longer and longer I am in ministry and I counsel with people and talk with people, we like to use the celebrities as the example. The truth is, all we have to do is look in our families. All we have to do is look across the workspace at work to find people who are in the exact same situation. They may not have as much as some celebrity does, but they're doing really, really well, and yet there's this lack of happiness, this lack of contentment, this lack of satisfaction. By the way, do you know that if you make $50,000 a year, you are in the top 1% of the world in income? $50,000, you are in the top 1%. So you're a 1%er. Did you know that? Everybody wants a family. Everybody wants a satisfaction. That I looked down and just saw the word family, so I said it. I don't even know why. I'm like, hey, that word family, let's just say it. Not only do we want a satisfaction that lasts, but we want a satisfaction that is deep. We want a satisfaction that is very, very deep. Not surface level, but something that goes down really far. C.S. Lewis captures this a couple different times that he writes. Probably one of my favorite writers when it comes to joy. When it comes to talking about joy, I love C.S. Lewis and his writing about joy. Not his wife, but the actual joy and happiness. He says this. This was a radio talk that he gave on Hope. On the British Broadcasting Company. He said, most people learn to look into their own hearts, would know that what they want, and they want acutely something that cannot be had in this world. So they look in their hearts and they know they want something, but what they want can't be found in the world. There are all sorts of things in the world that it offers to give to you, but none of them keep their promises. The longings which arise in us when we first fall in love, or we first think of some foreign country, or we first take up some subject that excites us, are longings that no marriage, nor travel, nor longing can actually satisfy. So in other words, let's just take marriage for instance. You get married, and there's this longing in you in that marriage. And this joy and this happiness and this satisfaction in that newness of marriage. And you think, okay, that longing and satisfaction, that it's actually about the marriage. But what C.S. Lewis is saying, that thing, that joy, that satisfaction arises in the marriage, but then the marriage doesn't actually quench that deep-seated desire that you had. It doesn't actually, so what happens if the marriage falls apart? You're still wanting that satisfaction. What happens if you think of a foreign country and then that excitement about, oh my gosh, we're going to this foreign country, this is going to be great. Well, that excitement that's stirred up in you, C.S. Lewis says, is really not about the foreign country. We all have that in us. Something always gets stirred up. This satisfaction always gets stirred up and we want it. And then he says this in Mere Christianity. We are summoned to pass in through nature, beyond her, into the splendor which she rightfully reflects. So we want to pass, we get all this stuff in the world, but we are actually longing to pass through the stuff to something deeper beyond the stuff that gives us satisfaction. And we can't put words to it. There's something in us that knows, I want something deep. I want something that lasts. So that's what we're all looking for. All human beings are looking for a happiness or a satisfaction that lasts and that is deep. And we search for it all over the place, yet we can't find it. So, what do people do when they can't find it? Right? It. This thing that they can't even put words to, that they want to feel, they want to experience. What happens when you know something is missing? Well, there are at least 7 things people try to do to cope, okay? 4 of these are going to be, if you believe happiness exists, then there's 4 things that can happen. And if you believe it doesn't exist, there's 3 things that will happen, all right? And of course, these are not exhaustive lists, but these are good things to talk about. I want you to see this. So if you believe happiness exists, but you haven't got it yet, here's 4 responses. For number 1, the young. They'll say this, I know that I'm not happy yet. I know that I'm not satisfied yet. But look how young I am. Once I get older and I get what I want, then I'll be happy. Okay? So, a young person says, I believe that ultimate happiness and satisfaction exists. I believe it exists. I believe it's out there. But of course, I haven't got it yet. I'm just starting out. Once I get where I want to be in life and accomplish what I want to accomplish and acquire what I want to acquire, then I'll get that I'm looking for. So that's how the young cope with it. I'm just not there yet. I'm going to get there. I'm just not there yet. Number 2, the resentful. This young person doesn't stay young forever, as I'm finding out, coming up on my 40th birthday. Played basketball with my son's junior high basketball team. Hurt myself twice. What happens when you get older and you start doing all the things that you knew you were going to do when you were younger, and you still can't find it? You're like, oh no, I went after all this stuff and I'm still not satisfied. I thought when I was here in my life, I would be satisfied. One of the main reactions is to blame all the obstacles that have kept us from achieving the things that we need to be satisfied. We say to ourselves, man, I would have ended up happy if it wasn't for so-and-so. I would have ended up happy if this obstacle wouldn't have gotten in my way, or this person wouldn't have prevented me from getting there. I would have been happy if this thing wouldn't have happened to me. And so what we say is that I would have been happy, but I was prevented from ultimately getting what I needed to get. Number 3. But what happens if we actually get everything that we want? We accomplish everything that we want. No obstacle was there. Okay? So there was nothing that prevented. I actually got everything that I wanted when I was younger. I got it all. And yet, I'm still not happy. Many people blame the stuff they have. Here's what I mean by that. I know I got this house, but if I had that house. I know I got this spouse, but if I had a spouse that was like that. I know I've got this job, but if I had that job. So they acquire everything they wanted to acquire when they were young, when they looked in the future and saw their life. They're like, I got it. I got all this stuff. I'm still not happy. Well, maybe it's the wrong house, the wrong spouse, maybe it's the wrong job. And if I change all that, or if I push past that to something better, and so this is my number 3 is called the driven, because those people can be productive in society because they're always driving themselves to the next better thing and the next better thing, and they're going to push through and get it. So we go through houses, we go through jobs, we go through spouses, and we constantly reinvent our lives, assuring ourselves that the next level, there we'll get it. So I didn't get it at this level, but I'm going to push through, get a different spouse, a different house, a different job, and then I'll get it. And then I'll push through, and then I'll get it. And we're constantly telling ourselves the next level is where we're going to get it. Psychologists call this the hedonic treadmill. Hedonism, you ever heard of hedonism? Hedonic treadmill. When you're on a treadmill, right? And let's say you're walking on it, and you got it at a 3. So you're just walking at a brisk, slow walk, right? That's my walk. I don't know if you went on a treadmill, that's how I walk. What happens if you crank that sucker up to 10 and you start sprinting as fast as you possibly can? You may fly off the back, yeah. Let's say you don't fly off the back. You don't go anywhere, do you? You've put forth tons of energy, but you actually didn't go anywhere. You just moved your feet. You're still in the same place you are. You're going faster, you're going harder, but you're still in the same place that you are. And eventually, you just exhaust yourself. You become so exhausted from running in place faster and faster and faster. If I get to that next level, I'll be satisfied. If I get to that next level, I'll be happy. If I get there, then that's what I'm looking for. And then eventually, we're so exhausted we can't go on any further. And so what happens is, we come to number 4, the despairing. What if we never find it? What if, after removing all the obstacles and achieving more and more and more, we believe it's still out there, but we still can't find it? You know what we do? We despair. And ultimately, we hate ourselves. Because you come to the realization, I don't have what I wanted, and it's my fault. I'm not good enough. I can't do it well enough. And you blame yourself. Your life is not what you wanted, and it's your fault because you made bad decisions. So you hate yourself. So if you believe happiness is out there, you could be young and just want it to give it time. You can be the resentful and say, well, I would have gotten it if it wasn't for so-and-so, or if it wasn't for this obstacle or that obstacle standing in my way. You might be the driven to say, well, I've got all this stuff, but I just need something better than it. Just something more, something more, something more. In the end, you may become despairing and hate yourself. So those are the 4 basic assumptions on human beings. If you believe it's out there. But what if you don't believe it's out there? What if you don't think ultimate happiness exists? Well, there are 3 things I want you to see. And the truth is, all of them are problematic as well. Number 1, altruism. Often people who devote themselves to being happy and seeking personal achievement in their early life, at some point they might turn away from it. They might turn away from it. And instead they move towards social causes and improving other people's lives. They can't be truly happy, but they want some kind of fulfillment in this world. They're like, listen, I know that the ultimate happiness is not out there, like it doesn't exist, but I want some fulfillment in this life. So instead of running after things that are just going to try to make me happy in the short term, I'm going to turn towards social causes, and I'm going to turn toward charities, and I want to make other people's lives better, and then maybe in that I can find fulfillment. Problem with this is that ultimately it's selfish. You're using the charities and the social causes, you're using them to make yourself feel better. You're using it. You don't ultimately care about the issue, but you want to help somebody so you can feel better about yourself. You're using the needy and the poor to give yourself self-worth. Helping others in response to your own discontentment will die off in the long run. It's going to die off in the long run. It's going to cause destruction for you and for other people. Man, I've seen this. I've seen this in quote-unquote Christians who were like, I'm gonna find my fulfillment in this cause. And they poured themselves in it. Ultimately, not getting what they wanted. And then they abandoned the cause and abandoned the people that they were supposedly helping to begin with. Number 2, cynicism. Someone may say, when I was younger, I thought fulfillment was out there. I thought sex and love and a career would be much more satisfying. And now I realize I've grown up. I've stopped chasing after that which I can't get. I've stopped chasing, rainbows and all these things that I think life is going to be. I've stopped chasing all that because I've grown up and I've lowered my expectation of life, and I've learned just to enjoy what I have. And when I've done that, I've got along just fine. Now, as sensible as that sounds, it is problematic for 2 basic reasons. Number 1, it can make you condescending, bigoted, and legalistic to people who are still trying to find it. It'll just turn you on people. Number 2, it can harden your heart, and you can begin to dehumanize yourself and others. Become cynical about people, condescending, judgmental, bigoted toward other people. Because why are they still trying to go after this? Don't they know that there's no such thing as ultimate satisfaction and happiness? What a waste of time. Just enjoy what you have. Stop doing all this stuff. You can become hard-hearted toward other people. You could become hard-hearted toward yourself. And then lastly, number 3, detachment. This goes back to what we were talking about at the very beginning with the early happiness hypothesis. You got to detach from everything. You don't want to love anything. You don't want to put hope in anything too much because you know it's just going to let you down anyway. What kind of life is this? C.S. Lewis has another great example about love. He says, when you love, he said, well, you can choose not to love. Human beings can choose not to love. You can put yourself in a box. You can shut the lid. You can drill it closed and nail it closed from the inside so that you don't have to love anybody and nobody can love you. You won't get hurt. You won't be disappointed. You won't be dissatisfied with relationships because you've blocked yourself off. He said, but what you've done is you've just put yourself in a coffin. What kind of life is there in detaching from everything? So, we want something. Every human being wants something that this life cannot give us. And there is not one worldview that gives satisfying answers. This is where Christianity's worldview steps in to this void that human beings have, and they give a reasonable, logical, and rational answer to the happiness problem. The Christian theologian Augustine in the 4th century said that one of the biggest problems is that our loves are out of order. Our loves are out of order. He says, here's the issue. The issue is not that you love your spouse. The issue is not that you love your stuff. That's not the issue. The issue is that you don't love God first. You don't love God supremely over those things. So all your loves are out of order. Jesus says to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. Jesus knew that the only way to find happiness was to find it in the Lord. If other things supersede your love for the Lord, it will sabotage your happiness. It will sabotage it. Augustine stated, That there was nothing wrong with loving your work, your spouse, your house, or any other earthling thing. But if your loves are out of order, you will ruin those things. You'll ruin those things. So if your love for anything in this world supersedes your love for God, then you will ruin the very thing that you say you love. You'll destroy it. You'll destroy it. Because you are making something in this world out to be something it cannot be. And if you do that, you will destroy that in your hands. As Augustine wrote, speaking to God in his famous book, Confessions, he says this to God: "You stir man to take pleasure in praising you, because you have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until it rests in you." Turn with me to John chapter 6. I just want to read you. Jesus says this in different ways in John chapter 6. But I want you to go to verse 35. This message that Jesus preached in John chapter 6 is all about satisfaction, happiness, and joy. It's the whole thing's about. Look at what Jesus says in verse 35. "And Jesus said to them," now remember, these were people who were fed the day before at the feeding of the 5,000. So all of these people that Jesus is preaching this message to were with him on the other side of the sea and got fed. Like they ate bread, they ate fish, and they followed him across. He went across and they followed him over. And Jesus had already told them, the reason why you followed me over here is not because you want me to satisfy you spiritually. You came over here because you want more physical bread and fish. That's the reason you followed me over here. You're not truly coming over here to seek me. You're seeking what I can give you. And so he turns their whole thought process was, look at what Jesus gave us the day before, and if this is what he's going to do for us, we'll make him king. And Jesus turns the whole story. And look at what he says in verse 35. Jesus said to them, "I am the bread of life." See, you're wanting physical bread like yesterday. You're wanting what I did for you yesterday to be what I do for you every single day. But you're not getting it because I am actually the bread of life. You need to look at that beautiful thing that I did for you yesterday, and you need to step beyond it to see where the true bread comes from. I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger. He's not talking about literal food, is he? Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me will never thirst. Jesus is saying this: if you make me the supreme love in your life, you can find satisfaction. You can actually find it. And if you find your supreme satisfaction in Jesus, then everything else can be taken away. And you still have what actually satisfies. You still have what actually satisfies. I love this phrase. I use it often, but it's biblical math. Here's biblical math. If you have everything minus Jesus, it equals nothing. If you have nothing plus Jesus, it equals everything. You can have nothing. But if you have Jesus, he says, I'll ultimately satisfy you. Now, do you remember when we did our series called Death by Living, where we talked about things of the earth, stuff, the gifts of God? How do we love the gifts that God has given us? And you remember there were two approaches that we take right? You have the comparative approach, which is compare Jesus to everything. Get that settled to get that knocked out. Compare Jesus to everything. Once you are establishing in your heart that Jesus is supreme over everything else, you've compared him, and nothing compares to Jesus. That's when the phrase is when Jesus says, if you do not hate your father and mother, you cannot be my disciple. Okay, what he's doing, he's saying, do the comparative thing. Compare me to your father and mother, and if you don't love me supreme over your father and mother, you can't be my disciple. Okay, that's the comparative approach. However, we do not live like that in our discipleship and sanctification. We do not say every day, I can't love my wife with all my heart because I've got to love Jesus with all my heart. So today, my wife's just not going to get everything I got. Sorry, honey, but compared to Jesus, you're nothing, so I got to treat you that way. Like, we can't live that way, right? Like, we cannot live in the comparison mode forever and ever and ever. What you do is you establish that, right? And you may have to do some checkups along the way, right? It's like you have a disease and you get healed from that disease. But then I think of Matt Chandler at the Village, right? He had brain cancer, had a tumor. He has been clear now for, 4 years? But guess what he does every single year? He goes back, gets the scan, make sure it's still gone. Okay? There are times we have to do that. We got to come back and say, Lord, let's do the comparison thing again. Am I really keeping you supreme? Get with God, establish that in your heart and your mind, make sure that you're clear on that. But then don't go back living your life in the comparative mode. We live our life in the integrative mode. Here's the integrative mode. Jesus at the center, everything else on the outside of the circle, like the wheel, with all the spokes coming off, and you see everything in light of Jesus being supreme. Now, I don't have to worry about if I love my wife too much. If I've already established that Jesus is supreme over my wife, then I am free to enjoy my wife for the glory of God. Then I am free to enjoy my lunch for the glory of God. Then I'm free to enjoy all the blessings and gifts that God gives me because I won't ruin them. I can love them deeply because I won't ruin them. Why? Because I've already established Jesus is my supreme. Jesus supersedes everything else. He's where I find my ultimate satisfaction and joy and happiness. And so as long as I've got Him, I'm fine. So I'm free to emotionally attach myself to all kinds of stuff in this world. Because that's not ultimately where I find my satisfaction. So I can enjoy all these things. Supreme love for God orients our affections, orders our desires, gets our loves right, and integrates that into our life. This is the gospel solution to the two extremes of trying to deal with happiness. It does not reject the stuff of the earth. Right? That's what the Stoics said. That's what the Greek philosophers said. That's what the Eastern religion. Just detach. You're never going to be happy with the stuff, so just pull back from the stuff. The other extreme is, well, we got to find our joy in the stuff. We got to find our happiness in the stuff. And the gospel comes into those, right in between those two extremes, and says, no. We find our ultimate satisfaction and happiness in Christ. And that orients all our desires for the stuff properly. So now we can enjoy the stuff as they should be enjoyed. Because we have oriented everything around our bread of life. The ultimate hunger and satisfaction that we find in Christ. See, here's the point of this series. Only Christianity offers that. There is not another worldview, even a religious worldview, that offers that. It is the only worldview that offers this. It is the only rational, logical, and reasonable worldview to turn to ultimately be happy.